Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming. My name is Solo and this is more Elden Ring tier list. About 4 to 5 months ago I went through the main weapon types and my tier list or rankings for them. And since then there's been various buffs and nerfs in various patches, and the major patch of 1.07 changed damn near everything. So we have some new additions as well as some different gradings. Let's begin though. So here's the tier list. We have S, A, B and C as always. These are the best intelligence weapons in my opinion. So even if they're like lower B or C, I still think it's a damn good weapon. So where to begin? I think we'll start at C because we have a couple of changes here, starting with, the bastard stars, the flail. It's no secret that I'm not a massive fan of flails in Elden Ring. I think they're a fun weapon type, but they're incredibly weak. Their moveset sucks, their range sucks. They're just not very strong. The strongest Bastard Stars here is basically the only viable one thanks to its Ash of War, which looks cool and is very effective. The downside is obviously it's not Wing of Astel, which completely outclasses it in all ways. But in 1.07, the Bastard Star, Nebula specifically, was buffed to have more attack power in PvE specifically. So it is better, but it's still a flail at the end of the day, still C grade in my opinion. On the other hand, we have two weapons here that were previously a low B grade that I'm now putting into a C grade. These are the Crystal Swords, the regular and rotten. There hasn't really been any change to these straight swords. I just feel that I've overrated them a bit. And also, with so many weapons having different changes in various patches, and these guys just seeing no love at all, and them having kind of a boring Ash of War, I figured they deserve more of a C grade than a low B. Their output's good all the same when you power stance them, and it's nice to have a weapon with Scarlet Rot in a magical style. There's nothing wrong with them, and that's why they're on this list. They're just not that strong either. But now let's get interesting as we go to B grade, starting with Helfen's Steeple, which was not on my list before. Since then, I've done a whole build around it, and I found this is an incredibly useful weapon in power stance, and it's been buffed in 1.07 many ways. The Ash of War essentially lights your weapon on fire with that magical black flame, dealing increased magic damage and generally looking awesome. The buff itself is a sort of mini attack, but that's about it. So I found that it works best in power stance with another weapon, like the Darkmoon Greatsword there. Death's Poker would be another great pick. Now, as I said, it's been buffed. The Ash of War Ruinous Ghost Flame has longer duration, attack power improvements, better poise damage, and better recovery on its animations. Those are all very nice, but not anything to make it majorly different. I still think the weapon's best in power stance rather than on its own, but it is a cool and effective weapon, more so now, so B grade feels right to me. On the other hand, we have this katana here, the Meteoric Oreblade, also not in my original tier list, and also a weapon I've since done a build with. A very cool looking blade with a really cool scabbard actually specifically. It's one of those gravity weapons. As a katana, it has the katana moveset, which is always awesome, bit of bleed on it by default because of that, but it's that Ash of War that really matters here, the Gravitas Ash of War, which is an AoE that pulls enemies in, staggering them, dealing damage, and hopefully leaving them vulnerable. In this patch 1.07, the poise during the cast has been improved to protect you a little bit while you do it, which was very needed really. This is a really cool weapon, but not super effective on its own. Once again, I like it in power stance like Helfen's Steeple. Working it with another katana was how I raised the output of it, then used the Ash of War where relevant to catch people out. I think it's a cool, fun, and effective weapon, but I also don't think it's broken OP or anything, so B grade once again makes sense to me. Another weapon that deserves a mention though is of course the Ruin's Greatsword, a colossal sword here, which have been both buffed and nerfed in this patch. Essentially, they feel more like Colossal or Ultra Greatswords should, with improved base moveset across the board over various patches. But that stupid crouch poke spam, that's been nerfed to have lower range and a slower animation. Because you have much more poise damage with these weapons, you can stagger enemies and get multiple hits off of them. You know, they should be slow, heavy hitting weapons, and that's what they are now. In the case of the Ruin's Greatsword, it's going to have high AR, it's magical, it has a unique heavy where you slam down and burst out this gravity sort of shock, or the Ash of War, like the Blasphemous Blade, a really long range slam. Super effective. As a magical colossal sword then, I do think it's very solid and very effective. The problem is, I believe there's another magical colossal sword that literally outclasses it 1-for-1. So that's why it's in B grade. Another weapon that I think stays in B grade compared to where it used to be, these are the swords of Saint Trina. Little straight swords with an intricate design and engraving on them, look really cool, but of course these are the sleep swords. You use an Ash of War and it strikes out, sending a cloud of sleep and an attack that deals sleep damage, or rather status build up. That puts enemies to sleep, leaving them vulnerable to criticals, or stunning them, leaving to big bursts with just say like the straight sword power stance moveset. Effective and fun, and one of the few actual sleep weapons. In previous patches they were improved to have a faster animation on the Ash of War, but since then no changes have been made. So they're just fine and certainly definitely worthy of a B grade. Lastly, for B grade, we have Loretta's War Sickle here. This neat looking halberd with a really unique Ash of War, a sort of magical leap up and attack and thrust down, which is used by certain speedrunners and people skipping areas for whatever reason, due to the verticality you get when you use it. But that Ash of War is effective and has been buffed in this patch. It has more poise damage on the first attack, and in general, better recovery. That might push it over to the edge of A if it was also improved on its damage, maybe. But as it's only the first attack that's had poise and it's just a bit of recovery, I feel like it doesn't need to really go up a grade. It's still a solid and effective weapon, just slightly better now. But now we move to the A grade where the weapons get particularly good, starting with, let's say, the Royal Greatsword. As that direct comparison to the other Colossal Sword in this list, I believe the Ruins Greatsword is just outclassed here. Not only is this a beautiful looking Colossal Sword that benefits from the buffs of the Colossal Swords, but also the nerf of the poke. It comes with its own unique Ash of War, the Wolf's Assault, which has been buffed in this patch, surprisingly. They gave it more hyper armor on the Ash towards the end of it, which just kind of like ran out of it, and now it's just stupid. In a previous patch, it was also made faster, so compared to before, you can just spam the Ash of War and ignore everything. Trading damage, being staggered is just not really a thing that I needed to worry about. I tried it against various new game bosses and none of them could stagger me at any point. All I did was just press the Ash of War until they were dead, and it was very effective. But then it's just a really good Colossal Sword with great AR as well. Great range, great moveset, the new better poise, so staggering enemies more. This weapon's kind of nuts now, and it'd probably be an S grade if they still had that stupid poke. And even then, I'm still considering it. On the other hand, we have another A tier weapon, but this one's just a colossal weapon rather than a sword. The Fallingstar Beastjaw is essentially a colossal hammer style of play with a gnarly design, that like pincer of the actual beast itself. Colossal weapons in general were improved to have slightly faster attacks and of course more poise on their attacks, so staggering enemies more often. And so this weapon benefited from that. Previously I had it in A grade and its Ash of War really was the reason that it was. You can just spam this shot of gravity from really long range, target an enemy and it's just super accurate, super threatening in PvP or PvE, and it can stagger bosses, so you just spam it, then take a critical, and then continue spamming it. Now the basics are improved with better attack speed and poise, so it's more viable to use just as a weapon. Yeah, it's just very, very good. Now we come to another weapon that has had buffs and nerfs and buffs and nerfs. It's the Sword of Night and Flame, the very cool straight sword that has a unique Ash of War where you ready the blade, and then you have a light or heavy to choose between. The light will send out a laser beam, which would normally need high sorcery to use, or with the heavy, you can send out that wave of fire. It used to be a lot stronger because you do stupid damage. Now you just do very good damage. And it's been buffed in this patch. Its attack power is better in PvE. You have better control where you can change the direction of the normal attack, so the laser when you're using this. And they've actually given the weapon damage detection too on these ashes. So when you thrust with the laser or swipe with the fire, the actual sword will deal damage now, increasing its burst ever so slightly if you use it at melee distance, which is just nice. Not enough to push it back into S tier, I don't think. I'm happy to see it return to good form in some way here. Moving on, let's talk about these Colossal Swords. These are the Starscourge Greatswords, one weapon turned to two, which means you have a kind of minor moveset where you're just doing the double light attack with both in a sort of power stance way, or you can heavy attack, which just ends up using one, which is a shame. However, its Ash of War is just incredible. That cry can be buffed by the raw medallion, and the explosive damage it does is awesome, and it looks really cool too. This weapon was A tier for me before, just because, yeah, it's just effective. Double hits of Colossal Swords really hurts and staggers, and the thing is, with the Colossal buffs and nerfs, this one just wins because it never had that crouch poke in the first place. Now it's just better with faster attacks and bigger poise damage to hold people in place, which is kind of how this thing was so good anyway. So yeah, so far the whole A grade have just been slightly improved, but all remain A grade, which is still a theme with the final weapon in A grade. We of course are now talking about the Death's Poker. I love this weapon. The Ash of War allows you to do three things. Poke and blow up this frosty death orb, follow it with a light to send out fire on the ground to burn those that stand in it, or do a heavy to specifically blow up the orb in a massive radius and deal much more damage. The only change since then was the prior to 1.07 two-handing of Greatsword buff, and this weapon benefits from that because it's not a bad one to use on its own. So the buff to it was very, very minor. It's previously towards the end of A grade, and I think that remains now. I still love this weapon. It's very fun to use, even though the weapon itself is very boring looking. The Ash of War is just too cool. But this brings us to the S grade. Only 3 weapons are here, and yeah, they're much the same. It's the Darkmoon Greatsword to kick us off, which has somehow been buffed even more. It was still my favorite, top of the pack, S tier intelligence weapon. In 1.07, they made it so the Ash has reduced stamina consumption, which was never an issue in my opinion for the strong and charged attacks. And then it's also got damage detection on that weapon swing too. So when you do the heavy attack and throw out that swipe, the sword will also hit, dealing extra damage, aka meaning trading with it in PvP or using it at melee range. You just have more damage now. I don't know why they did that. It didn't need it, but I'll take it. You can do so much damage with this weapon at range with the charge attacks. You can be so stupidly effective with it in PvP. You can run it in various builds like I did with Health and Steeple in Power Stance, and it's cool as hell. I can't believe they buffed it, because that didn't happen to these other 2 S tier. For example, Wing of Astel, no changes. It was just the Bastard Star that had its nebula improved. The reason this is S tier though is because you've got a curved sword here which can be used in Power Stance for some of the fastest combo of attacks and best running attack in the game in my opinion for roll catching. Then it has a unique heavy attack where you can either do 1 or 2 quick range attacks at short range, costing no FP. Not to mention Nebula itself, the Ash of War. It's one of the highest burst DPS outputs in the game. You just spam it on a target and it just blows them up. And it's a multi-pop, so it hits at the start and then after a delay the explosion goes off, which means it's insane for trading and catching people out in PvP. It's an insanely good weapon and definitely S tier, just like our final weapon. Obviously, Moonveil is S tier. So much damage to this day on this Ash of War, whether you're doing the vertical or horizontal swipes. But even baseline, like it's a katana. You got bleed buildup, great stats, great moveset. It's a super fun weapon to use, and that's why it was essentially the most popular weapon in the OG patch of Elden Ring. And it's still stupid strong after all the nerfs and different changes to it. Like in 1.07, it was also completely ignored, and yet I still see it often, and it's still really effective. But that brings us to the end of the intelligence tier list. One thing that came up in the comments last time was how there are a lot of great intelligence weapons if you just take a normal weapon and make it intelligence and then give it like a good Ash of War, which is true. But this tier list and these tier lists, these are about the unique weapons that are inherently magical to begin with. But still, let me know if there's any others that should have been included in this list that I didn't, or if you changed the rankings at all. Next up, we've got the arcane tier list, which is going to be interesting. But for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.